In Jamaica, nearly 1 in 4 girls experience sexual abuse. Across the Caribbean, it is nearly 1 in 2. And even when they speak, many are not protected.
It was flight and fight mode, so
Yeah,
it
that's
was
what it
survival.
sounded like.
Yes, it was. My mother didn't understand it. She would ask me, why are you acting like this? Why are you carrying on like this? Why how did you turn? Like, I don't do that. I don't be cussing. I don't be, and like mommy, like you saw a lot of signs. Like, what are you talking about? So up to this day, we don't have a relationship as closely because she is in denial about a lot of stuff. And so writing this book was, boy, I was going in war zone.
I think she may be in denial because of guilt.
Yeah.
She does not want to face the guilt of what she allowed to happen to you as a child, and that's how some women respond to it. Welcome back to the W.E.T Show. Joining us today is author Sherika Lawrence, whose powerful book, Entrapment to Freedom, takes us from trauma to triumph through the power of the Holy Spirit. Shekira, welcome to the W.E.T Show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
And joining this conversation is psychologist Samuel McDermott, who will help us unpack the emotional and psychological dimensions of healing the inner child. He is a therapist with a strong foundation in counseling and trauma-informed care in the Cayman Islands. Welcome, Samuel.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Shekira, you speak of God as the author and finisher of your faith. Who were you before that relationship became real to you?
Is a good question. Actually, I didn't have an identity. I did not know who I was, so I would say just worldly blended. I was a foreshadow of whoever was around me. I was broken. I was confused. I was not stable emotionally at all. I was controlling because I thought I was protecting myself. So I was fearless, fearless. I could do anything and be like, man, I could do it, but I have a God fear now that, hey, can't be doing all of these things. I have somebody who's, keeping me accountable now.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your background. What brought you to be this person who was, as you said, fearless, street smart? What brought that personality out from Shekira?
Okay, so more personally now, from the age of 7 or 8, I was, molested. I went through a stage of molestation in the comfort of my home, living with my mom. I was living with a single parent. I was living with her and seeing my daddy from time to time. My father actually was a policeman / firefighter. My mother was a custodian, and just going through the norms, she was trying to survive, but she was working more than often. So she had to leave me in family's hands. And a season came where she allowed me to be in her boyfriend's care. And so she left him to carry me to school, wait on me, pick me up, and stuff like that. And so he started to groom me into uncomfortable behavior, so what I did not know was abnormal and was sexual. So he groomed me into some sexual uncomfortable behaviors. I went through a hard time in school. I always had the talents I had, but because of that, I wasn't putting myself out there. I wasn't really involved in after school activities. But I knew a lot of people. And so I went through in school with rumors, with a lot of boys had crushes on me. And so when I didn't like them, I used to fight boys a lot. So that caused me to have a hate for men. And I grew a hate for males. And so I was fighting a lot. I was fighting all the time. And so I got in trouble all the time in high school, up to junior high school, actually. The teachers, I had a lot of foreign teachers, so our languages were clashing. I don't know if you could understand me, but
Yes,
as a child, the languages were clashing. And so I didn't care for school. He is a lot of uncomfortable things that, he put me into. So I was angry. And so I was just really angry. And I was quiet. I never spoke about it. I kept it in, because we would went through an abusive stage. He abused my mom for quite a long time. And then he moved us into his space or an environment where he could control. And so I saw a lot of abuse, kicking down the door. When she would go and get a restraining order, he would kick down the door, just, while out, so, but at the same time, she started a new walk with Christ. And so she came out of Anglican and Catholic into Baptist. And so as that was happening, she just developed a relationship with Jesus. And so that she was carrying me to church, but at the same time, I was dancing. I was very involved in the church. I was dancing, singing, teaching Sunday school. And this was from a child until I was an adult. And so, but nobody knew the hurt I was carrying. Nobody spoke about abuse in the church. Nobody cared to bring awareness about molestation. Nobody cared about kids being abused. As far as we concerned, beaten and telling the kids, be quiet, you can get slapped side your head if you ask too much questions. So that was like, you can't be saying nothing else, you can get in trouble, so. But I would put a pin in there, going back to a child when he started. I did tell my mom, I rang the alarm a few times, but he was so aggressive. She was so afraid of him that she went to the police, but the police just laughed at her and be like, you can go right back to him, y'all kind of women. So they kind of categorize her and put her in that, status quo, like this is one of the ladies that always comes and she report and then go right back. And so that was that. And so they did nothing about it. So he kept coming back. She kept accepting him back. And so to me, I was like, okay, so since you're doing this, I said something to you a few times. It became so bad that I developed a cussing attitude. I became angry and she caught me cussing him. And I was saying, I'm going to tell. But she ridiculed me instead of putting him in his place. Of course, he lied. I went through high school with open shame. Him coming to my prom, dragging me out of there and bringing her there with curlers in her hair and night clothes and stuff like that. So I went through humiliation. And then some school rumors from boys that wanted to like me, but I was not interested. So I had to fight my way through most of my life. I literally had to fight like males off. And that developed a hatred for males. But my physical father was not really involved, like I said, because he was a police. He was always to work until he had a stroke. And so him having a stroke, he had to stay home and get healthy. He had to get a psychiatrist to bring him back to health, at home. He didn't stay in the hospital long, so he was at home healing. And so I got the privilege, not really the privilege, my mom moved me out and down by him, so I grew up there until I finished school. But my father gave his life to Christ as well during that time, and he was the one who led me to Christ, visiting him at the age of 11. I'll never forget that. So he personally walked me through this prayer and invitation of receiving Christ. And even though I didn't understood it and I didn't see the effects of what God was doing, God still kept me sane. He still kept me, because my mother's boyfriend was a coke addict. He was on cocaine. And so I didn't end up on drugs. I didn't end up pregnant. I didn't end up with AIDS or any other, STDs. And I was thankful for that, even though I didn't understand it. But my father basically was a raft in the ocean for me, so He didn't know anything either, but he kept me reading the scriptures at 5 a.m. in the morning. He kept me singing, worshiping with him, so and he was carrying me to church with him also. But during that time in school, he didn't know anything behind the scenes. I was hurting, I was raging, fighting and stuff like that. So, but you know,
Okay. So we have a better understanding of who the lovely Sherika is,
yes.
and I appreciate that, Sherika. It takes a mature person to be able to speak all of your background, whatever your trauma was, and to name it. So I commend you for that, and I appreciate you because you are now able to help others.
Thank you.
Because you're going to be able to help others. Let me ask another question. Psychologically, many women learn to survive by becoming strong too early. When you reflect now, do you think that strength was like survival rather than healing?
It was
Were
it
you
was survival mode, flight mode. It was flight and fight mode. So it
Yeah, that's
was
what it
survival.
sounded like.
Yes. Yes, it was. My mother didn't understand it. She would ask me, why are you acting like this? Why are you carrying on like this? Why you, how did you turn it? Like, I don't do that. I don't be cussing. I don't be, and like mommy, like you saw a lot of signs. Like, what are you talking about? So up to this day, we don't have a relationship as closely because she is in denial about a lot of stuff. And so writing this book was, boy, I was going in war zone.
I think she may be in denial because of guilt.
Yeah.
She does not want to face the guilt of what she allowed to happen to you as a child, and that's how some women respond to it. Now, Samuel, I'm going to bring you in at this point. We have listened to Shekira and we realize that this is a common trend affecting our women. What are some of the ways childhood trauma continues to live inside an adult woman?
All right. Thank you for that introduction again. Shakira, just before I answer the question, Shakira, your story is one of resilience and strength. And I just want to take the time to applaud you for really showing up for yourself and to be in the space where you can be a beacon of hope. Your example itself, I mean, I think your book is aptly titled too, because, so in answering the question, no, when we have adverse childhood experiences that resonates with us can resonate in the sense of leaving a lasting legacy of pain, of hurt, where that decides how it is that we act in our adult relationships, determines how it is that we perceive threats, etc. I think you were spot on in identifying that the aggression that you had was one that was there for survival, really, in the psychological realm, in terms of a theoretical framework. IFS, internal family systems, we speak to that part as a protector part, actually. So think of yourself as being in a room where there's a small fire, right? You want to get rid of that fire because your system now perceives that there's a threat. No, a few things can happen. You can get a fire extinguisher and you can extinguish the blaze, or a firefighter can come in and spray the hose and damage things and so on. No, sometimes when if a firefighter should come in and do that, then a lot of things would be destroyed versus you just using a fire extinguisher. So in this scenario, what you were explaining, Shakira, is that you had a firefighter that came in that wanted to protect you from further pain. It didn't matter who it was destroying. It didn't care about the hatred that was there. It just wanted to keep you safe. And that happens with a lot of persons who have experienced trauma, especially teenage boys, teenage girls. They respond in a way to keep themselves safe.
Yeah.
And adults may look on and see this and determine that this is rude, that the child doesn't know the place, when in reality, what's happening is that they're trying to protect themselves in the way that they know how. What makes it worse is when you're trying to find a voice for yourself and the adults who are supposed to keep you safe
Yeah.
aren't doing their job, aren't keeping you safe.
Yeah.
Then your system then begins to confirm that I can only keep myself safe. I cannot trust anyone to help me to be safe.
Yeah.
So I have to keep myself safe in any way, which can come across as aggression too. So these are very common things. Being aggressive. There's also being extremely people pleasing in tendencies too. Because sometimes we've also learned that if I don't speak up, if I keep quiet, then I won't get hurt.
Yeah.
All right. If I please you, then you will leave me alone. And especially if I've learned that, all right, if I cater to your whims, no matter how much I don't want to do it, you will just leave me alone and I'll live peacefully for a couple more hours, a couple more days. Then your system learns that in order to survive, I have to please people. All right. And it also shows up in our relationships with extreme submission, not speaking up for yourself, not standing up for yourself, not living a life according to your values. So, yeah, these are some of the few additional ways that trauma can leave a lasting legacy.
Yes. Yes. You're so correct.
Again, again, for you, Samuel, what does inner child healing mean psychologically? Because Shekira speaks about this in her book. And obviously, she's a very mindful and very aware young woman to
Very.
have written a book. And she has addressed certain issues, but we just want a little clarity on it today. What does inner child healing mean psychologically?
Okay. So, walk with me a bit. If it feels safe to do so, maybe close your eyes. If you don't want to close your eyes, fine.
So close.
Think of a time when you felt playful as a child, when you felt curious, when you felt compassionate, when you felt explorative. All right. Let's start there with a definition for what the inner child is. The inner child speaks through the language of play. The inner child speaks through the language of curiosity. I want to know what this is. I have dreams. I have fantasies. I want to be innocent because innocence is who a child is. Now, sometimes along the way, that innocence gets lost, especially when caregivers who are supposed to provide a protective and enabling environment for that innocence, they don't do what they're supposed to do. So that's when the inner child becomes wounded, right? That's when the inner child hides away, shirks away, becomes an exile, if you will, almost as if it's banished. And then there are different sides of us that come to the fore to keep us safe, to not allow that inner child to feel that pain again from being banished, from being rejected, from being hurt. So it acts up in ways that it wants to preserve, to protect. But coming back to that inner child means reclaiming that innocence, reclaiming that inner sense of self-worth, reclaiming what your values are, reclaiming that curiosity. A part of this also includes finding persons that are safe. So you mentioned your father, that he was a raft in the ocean. That was a safe person for you. In addition to that, finding something or someone that is bigger than you. You found God, you found spirituality. Well, your father introduced you to it. Your father introduced you to scriptures, to psalms, to singing, which brought a sense of connection to innocence, back to purity, which is really a path towards reclaiming that innocence, reclaiming that inner child. I do believe that you're right in saying that God placed him in your life at the right time. And I just wanted to use this platform to say, for persons who may have gone through traumatic experiences, if there is a space that you can find an opposite experience, as an experience that grounds you to something positive. Sometimes you say that we have to heal first before getting into relationships. I'd like to challenge that. Sometimes healing can come from healthy relationships. We can find ourselves in experiences that are alternative to the hurt that we've gone through, and there's nothing wrong with that. There can be mutual healing, not trauma bonding, but mutual healing. When you come from a place of being whole or seeking to better, and that person comes from the same space, and you're both healing, growing, learning, loving together. I believe you found that in your father, Shekira, and it's good that God placed this experience in
Yeah,
your life.
Okay, thanks a lot for that.
explained it so right.
Yes. This is a very beautiful discussion. Samuel, I want to find out now how faith and psychology complement each other in trauma recovery.
And this is where I can get into trouble.
Thank
However,
you.
so a lot of schools of thought have sought to separate spirituality, faith, and psychology. I am not from any of those schools of thoughts. I do believe that there are times in our lives when we cannot just rely on our inner strength. We have to rely on something that is bigger than us, right? I'm not going to tell anyone who that person should be. For me, it is the Christian God, the triune God. And when you find a sense of spirituality that is grounding, it helps to build a sense of resilience, because when everything else is failing, you're able to say that this will not fail. This Father will not fail. So something else just came to mind. A lot of relationships that we're in, not just romantic, but friendships as well, platonic relationships, we see that person and we see ourselves depending on how it is that we see God and how we think God views us. So quite often we may think of ourselves as less than, not amounting to anything, because we have this idea of God as being judgmental, not being a loving father, not being caring, etc. I mean, we may hear it in the songs that we sing, but if we don't have that personal relationship with him and experience that for ourselves, then we experience judgment from everybody else and we perceive judgment from everybody else. So all of that to say that faith, psychology is very much interconnected, and I don't think they should be separated at all.
Okay,
Yeah,
we agree.
yes, okay.
It's just that, you know, what I also want to commend her for is the fact I saw the cover on your book, Shekira. It's of a grown woman holding the hand of a child. And I'm assuming that this child is you and this grown woman is yourself.
Yeah,
So, I was very impressed. I was saying, there it is. That's exactly what it is. Mothering your inner child through the trauma, the challenges that a young woman would have to deal with in a relationship, even with motherhood, because of this particular trauma. And what I want to ask you now, Shekira, is what did forgiveness look like for you personally? Forgiving this individual that hurt you in such a way that you were broken, does it? And had to put back the pieces by yourself. For you personally, what did forgiveness look like for this man?
well, forgiveness was not in my mindset, not planted in my heart until he depicted a vision to me. It was, he had to literally show me, because I am a dreamer also, and I have visions, which is the next book. I just would like to say that right there. But he literally had to show me, enter me into the realm where he was just human. Without God showing me that, I was saying I could just, it was not in my mindset. I was not, thinking about that at all. It was not an option. But he showed me by reading, and engaging in worship and songs. And I always dreamt dreams. So when he gave me a glimpse of his life, of that he was hurting, I got the revelation that hurt people truly does hurt people. They have learned hurt, and he never learned how to love properly because he was never loved himself. So he gave me quite an fond understanding that it wasn't his choice to just pick you. It was just that he was available for Satan to use, or a spirit to use him in that time or when he was hurting. So this is what the spirit used him to do. So when God showed me that, it was easier for me to let go what he did to me because I saw him as God saw him. And the Lord saw him as just an innocent, my creation needed to be made whole again. He was just broken, wounded, and needed a different perception. He needed to see things differently in order for him to react different. And so he was like, this is the reason why he's doing what he's doing. His intentions were not just to hurt you and to damn you, but he is reacting of what was planted in him spiritually and, physically, because he went through abuse himself. I don't know the depth of it, but, so that's the only way I was able to forgive is through a dream. I was actually walking down his journey and he showed me his past and that all, needs forgiveness, including me. And he also showed me that if I did not let that go, that could also cost me my salvation. So that was that was very important for me to see because he was like, if you continue in this unforgiving giving attitude or behavior, this could cost you or damage your relationship with me because I am all about forgiveness and overcoming and moving past what was done to you. So
Okay. So let me pick up from here. You know that even though we try to separate this act of forgiveness from the spiritual and saying that, it's linked to just the brain and the nervous system and all of that. Okay, so Samuel, from a psychological perspective, what happens when we remain in unforgiveness? Can you explain the science behind it, if possible?
So when we remain, so first of all, I just wanted to make a point of difference. We often confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. That's not necessarily the same thing. We can forgive and not be in a place of bitterness, but we can still maintain and hold our boundaries, especially if it is that the person has not recognized that they did wrong. We don't have to pander to and reconcile. It's not the same thing. Forgiveness and reconciliation. There can be forgiveness and knowing that a relationship with that person may be impossible. That can be something. So let me just start with that. No, in terms of what's done to the body, there is this difference between distress, eustress in terms of stress management and how stress appears in the body. So distress, it promotes the production of cortisol, and cortisol is a stress management hormone. Now, when we have unforgiveness, bitterness, anxiety, when that person is around, depression, perhaps PTSD, then the cortisol levels that are spiked in our bodies, when it's sustained, then that can actually lead to cardiovascular issues. That can lead to what we call in the Caribbean high blood pressure or hypertensive issues.
Right.
That can lead to mental health issues too, so depression, anxiety, etc. So in fact, one of the things that I do to help clients work through trauma is to come to a place of forgiveness. Now, the caveat with that is that forgiveness cannot be forced. So if you're going to tell somebody you need to forgive your perpetrator, that is again removing choice from that individual. A person has to come to a place, just like you did, Shekira, where a vision was given to you and you made that choice to step into forgiveness. No, we cannot heal from trauma if it is that choice isn't involved in it. So forcing and shoving forgiveness down somebody's throat when they're not ready can be very dangerous, very damaging. But yeah, back to the original question. Yes, the unforgiveness can affect the body in so many different ways, and it can show up in the physical realm.
Okay. So, Shakira, I see you have your book out there, man. Can you just lift it up and let us have a better look? Yes, so that's the cover. That is so telling. Entrapment, freedom, right? So, can you read a passage from the book that speaks directly to the wounded child?
Okay. So you can't hide you can't heal what you hide. You've buried the pain, you've silenced the memories. But the little girl inside you or the little boy inside you, you still need to be heard. If you're tired of holding it all together on the outside while breaking on the inside, this is your path to freedom. In Entrapment to Freedom, you'll be guided step by step to confront what you've been carrying all of these years, healing your inner child, and partner with the Holy Spirit to break cycles for good. So this book is ideal for women and the men who's done surviving and ready to feel, be made whole. No more hiding, no more pretending, just healing, embracing the power of God and your peace because it's available.
What I like about that is that you did not just say women alone, you were inclusive. Men and women do go through this type of trauma. It's just that we probably see the percentage is more with women because we're more vulnerable in terms of we're smaller in size, men are stronger, and that sort of a thing. They're probably even more cunning, but that's for another discussion, right?
I don't think they're stronger. I don't
Physically stronger, I would say that they're physically stronger. You don't think so?
physically.
Oh, well, you were a little fighter. Can you imagine? Yes, though that adrenaline that was raging in you probably helped you with that fighting skill. That's interesting. Now, Samuel, what psychological truths did you hear in what she just read?
Hmm. You cannot heal from what you don't know. I think that summarizes what you just said. You spoke about confronting the hidden parts, path to confronting the hidden parts, and I think you are spot on. There's actually a phrase that we use in therapy. You have to name it to tame it, right? It's virtually impossible for you to heal from something that you're not aware of. So that is psychological truth. We call it interception, being internally aware. Now, if it is that we live in denial and we use defense mechanisms to shield us from the pain of confrontation, those same defense mechanisms can keep us stuck, right? So, again, I think you are incredibly spot on that you have to actually identify and unearth what is hidden for you to really get complete healing and processing from it.
Yes.
Okay, so we're at the segment where we allow the queen bee of the session to shine, and that's Shakira. Shakira, put on your crown, and we want to hear, listeners want to hear, where can we get Entrapment to Freedom? Where is it?
You can find it on Amazon, on Kindle, Amazon Kindle app, and the main. Right now, we're working on a website so that you can go directly there. And also find me on Facebook with Sky Empowered. And you can message me if you would like the link to directly to the page on Amazon. Just it. You have free pages on the Amazon Kindle app. So is that something you're interested in reading, I give you a free pages. So you can, it's actually cheaper on Kindle app. You just download the Kindle app because a lot of people doesn't know that. They think they can just get it on Kindle for, lesser price, but you have to download the app in order to join that Kindle family, so that is the only place you can find it. And right now I'm working on it, get stores. you know, hopeful to be working along with Miss Hattie Clarke to get the book out there as well, and probably so if you could just, put a word out there. So I'm looking
Right.
forward to
We're going to
getting
be
it out there.
looking at that.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at some like workshops, that sort of a
Sure.
thing. Right. So for all those listening, we will be putting on workshops in terms of this book, Entrapment to Freedom. So if you are somebody who has suffered this type of trauma or any type of trauma, just listen out, look out for these workshops, which we'll let you know all about it in due season. Now, final question to the both of you. What does freedom look like now? And I would say for Samuel, for a trauma person who has trauma, and for Shekira, the question is direct. What does freedom look like for you now?
So freedom from trauma, I would envision that it would look like someone who is responsive rather than reactive, who isn't guided by triggers, who isn't guided by emotional overwhelm, but is able to reclaim that free, innocent aspects of themselves that felt lost for many years, for perhaps many decades. That's really what freedom would look like.
Okay.
Okay.
Shakira.
Freedom for me looks like when you're embracing the new identity that you are now, that you became to know about yourself without, allow what they done to you. It is not no longer having a stronghold on you. You're able to move forward. You're able to respond, like he said, in a more freely behavior. You're not tied. You're not restrained to the words or what's been done to you. So freedom to me looks like you're moving forward progressively. You're progressing in life every day. You're not, your mind is freed, your spirit is freed, your emotion is freed. You're moving forward. You're not stagnated.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So thank you both for coming on the WET Show. We appreciate you. You're now a part of our community and consider yourself WET Show alumni.
Yeah. But I do have a question before we go. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
To
Yes.
Samuel, what if a child comes in with that type of, situation, will you be able to tell, can you read the child's behavior to detect that's what has been done to them? Or
Yeah, there are several things that we can do informally and formally as well. One thing is through history taking. Well, let me backtrack a bit. Earlier I had mentioned that children communicate through play, right? So sometimes kids can't even really articulate what they're feeling in languages that we use as adults. Sometimes they'll act it out through play, right? Through aggressive behaviors, through clingy behaviors. Sometimes, so I literally have a sand tray in my office with some figurines, some toys, some little miniatures, and I'll ask a child to create their own world for me in that sand tray. And they don't have to say anything, but just where they put certain figures, the type of figures that they use, how it is that they position certain things, how it is that they even play with the figures, that gives me a look into their own world. So I say all of that to say, don't necessarily look for just what a child is saying. Look for how a child is acting, look for seclusion, look for that child not wanting to bond, look for that child feeling or looking as if they feel silenced, not speaking up for themselves. Anxious behaviors, over anxious behaviors, very important. Bedwetting past a certain age. That can also be indicative of something not being so right. Kids using drugs at an early age. Sometimes we may think that that's being rude. No, the child is trying to numb certain feelings. The child is doing what they feel can help them, especially if they've even been introduced by an adult, which again is supposed to be protective. So yeah, there are ways in which we can tell that something is off and is not going the way it's supposed to go.
Thank you.
That answered your question, Shekira?
So there he right on.
So, folks, this has been the W.E.T Show, where healing her story transforms her future. See you in another one.